In 1933, the USDA handed American housewives a challenge that would make any modern nutritionist laugh out loud: stretch a single pound of hamburger into 7 separate family meals. They say it cannot be done. Those women did it anyway, and the health records suggest their families were in better shape than ours are today. Number 14 on this list was something local health departments spent years telling people to stop doing. Researchers just confirmed it eliminates more bacteria than the commercial antiseptic sitting in your medicine cabinet. Number 3 involves a chemical reaction that no modern baking equipment has ever managed to fully replicate. These 25 techniques kept millions of American families alive and fed when the banks locked their doors and the fields turned to dust. Here is the honest truth. If you walked into your kitchen knowing what your great-grandmother knew, you would put half the items in your shopping cart back on the shelf. Kraft brought in psychologists. General Mills changed their formulas. Entire industries were constructed around one goal: making sure you forgot how to feed and care for yourself without buying something first. Subscribe before we get started, because what follows might permanently change the way you think about your kitchen. Let us count them down. Number 25. Newspaper inside the icebox. Electric refrigerators did not reach most middle-class American homes until the late 1940s. Before that, your great-grandmother kept food cold with a 50-pound block of ice sitting inside a wooden cabinet. The Iceman made his rounds twice a week, and every hour between deliveries was time that block spent shrinking. To slow the melt, she pressed 3 or 4 sheets of old newspaper flat against the interior walls of that box. The layered newsprint created a dead air barrier that slowed heat transfer, sometimes stretching the life of a single ice block by a full day. Newspaper cost 2 cents. The ice block cost a quarter. Saving even 1 delivery per week added up when a factory worker's entire take-home pay might be $15. When Frigidaire started running advertisements mocking the icebox as a relic of the past, that trick vanished within a decade. But the physics behind it, trapped air as insulation, is the exact same principle built into every modern cooler on the market. Number 24. The bacon grease jar. Every Depression-era kitchen had one, a tin can or mason jar parked on the back of the stove full of strained bacon drippings. After every fry, the hot fat got poured through cheesecloth to remove the meat particles, which was the step that kept it from spoiling without refrigeration. That rendered fat went into everything: egg skillets, cornbread batter, beans, pie crusts. It stretched across every meal. A pound of bacon ran about 20 cents in 1934. The grease it left behind replaced butter, which was going for 40 cents a pound. Every strip effectively did 2 jobs. In the 1950s, the American Heart Association launched its campaign against animal fats, and housewives swapped their grease jars for Crisco, a hydrogenated vegetable oil we now understand produces trans fats far more harmful than anything that ever came out of a cast iron pan. Families across the rural South kept their jars going and never stopped. They understood something the rest of the country forgot. Number 23. White vinegar. Did everything. Before Clorox and Mr. Clean filled entire supermarket aisles, white vinegar was the cleaning agent of the American household. Your grandmother mixed it half and half with water and used it across every surface: windows, countertops, floors, even as a dish rinse. At 10 cents a gallon during the Depression, it replaced window spray, floor polish, and disinfectant in a single purchase. She added it to laundry rinse water as a fabric softener. She poured it down drains to cut through grease buildup. Rusty tools went into a bucket of it overnight. Cleaning product companies spent decades insisting vinegar was not powerful enough for the modern home. University researchers eventually confirmed what Depression-era housewives had figured out through experience. A 5% vinegar solution eliminates 99% of surface bacteria. We traded a 10-cent gallon for a cabinet full of $12 specialty sprays because the advertisements told us the old way was not good enough. Number 22. Flour sack dresses. Commercial flour came in cotton sacks, and practical mothers quickly noticed the fabric was sturdy enough to cut into clothing. By the early 1930s, flour companies had caught on and started printing their bags in floral prints, plaids, and stripes, knowing women would choose one brand over another based on the pattern. A 49-pound sack cost $1.50. The emptied bag provided enough fabric for a child's dress or a set of kitchen towels. Mothers collected matching patterns across multiple purchases, planning out a garment over weeks. Children wore flour sack outfits to school with careful stitching that made the fabric's origin impossible to identify. When inexpensive ready-made clothing started filling department store racks in the 1950s, flour companies discontinued the printed patterns, and the tradition disappeared within one generation. The textile industry needed buyers, not makers. Number 21. Dandelions were dinner. Before the chemically treated lawn became the suburban standard, your grandmother walked outside with a paring knife and came back with something for supper. Young dandelion leaves, picked before the plant flowered, were tender and slightly bitter. Excellent wilted in a hot pan with bacon grease and a splash of vinegar, or eaten raw alongside a hard-boiled egg. Dandelion greens carry more vitamin A than carrots and more calcium than milk. A complete nutritional food that grows itself without planting, watering, or fertilizing. After the war, the lawn care industry poured millions into campaigns positioning dandelions as the enemy, ugly weeds that required chemical destruction. Americans now spend roughly $2 billion annually on herbicides to kill a plant their grandmothers harvested for free. No government agency ever told people to stop eating dandelions. The companies selling the weed killer did. Number 20. Potato water was not waste. When your grandmother finished boiling potatoes, she saved the starchy cooking water in a jar instead of pouring it down the drain. Added to bread dough, that liquid fed the yeast and produced a lighter, more tender loaf than plain water ever could. Stirred into pan drippings over heat, it thickened gravy without needing extra flour or cornstarch. A 5-pound bag of potatoes cost about 15 cents and stretched across 5 meals. Using the cooking water meant extracting every bit of value from every penny spent. Modern recipes have quietly dropped this step and replaced it with extra ingredients to achieve the same result that our grandmothers got for nothing by simply not pouring it away. Number 19. Cardboard in the shoe. When soles wore through, and during the Depression, with most families owning a single pair of shoes, they wore through fast, your grandmother cut cardboard from a cereal box and slid it inside. It covered the hole, kept out the mud, and bought a few more weeks of use before a trip to the cobbler became unavoidable. Resoling cost 50 cents. New work shoes ran $3, close to a full week's wages for many men. The cardboard softened in rain and wore down in days. But it kept a child sitting in school and a man standing at work when there was nothing to spend at the repair shop. Resourcefulness was not optional. It was the only available response. Pattern break 1. The root cellar. That hole dug into the hillside behind the farmhouse was not just a storage space. It was the most effective food preservation system available to rural families during the entire Depression era. Underground temperatures held steady between 50 and 60 degrees through every season, cool enough to store potatoes, apples, turnips, and canned goods for months without any electricity whatsoever. A well-built root cellar cost nothing but the labor to dig it. Some families kept 500 pounds of potatoes and 300 quarts of canned food in a space no bigger than a small bathroom. The electric refrigerator made it obsolete by the 1950s, but there is something important nobody talks about. A root cellar runs on no power at all. When the electricity goes out, a refrigerator is just an insulated box. Your great-grandmother's cellar kept working through every storm and every blackout without missing a beat. We exchanged resilience for convenience and called that progress. Number 17. Soap from kitchen scraps. Your grandmother rendered cooking grease and fat trimmings, combined the result with lye water she made from hardwood ash, and produced her own soap. One batch cost essentially nothing beyond the labor and yielded enough bars to carry a family through 3 or 4 months. Store soap was 5 cents a bar, and households went through several bars a month. Procter & Gamble ran sustained advertising campaigns framing homemade soap as rough and old-fashioned, while positioning their factory bars as the gentle modern alternative. By 1950, the practice had nearly vanished from American homes. Families started buying something they had previously made for free, and the industry that replaced that knowledge never looked back. Number 16. Water glass for eggs. Before dependable refrigeration, your grandmother preserved eggs by mixing sodium silicate, sold in hardware stores under the name water glass for around 20 cents a jar, with water in a large stone crock, then lowering fresh, unwashed eggs into the solution. The silicate sealed the porous shell against air and bacteria. Eggs stored this way remained edible for 6 to 9 months at room temperature. Hens laid heavily in spring but slowed to nearly nothing through winter. Water glassing the spring surplus meant the family had eggs in January. 1 jar of sodium silicate preserved 10 dozen eggs. During World War II, the USDA actually included water glassing in its official preservation guides. After the war ended, those references quietly disappeared. Refrigerator companies were buying advertising by the page, and the government had no interest in undermining a booming appliance industry. Number 15. Bean soup on a dime. A single pot of bean soup fed a family of 6 across 3 days on roughly 10 cents worth of ingredients. Your grandmother soaked a pound of dried navy beans overnight, then spent the following day simmering them with a ham bone, an onion, and whatever vegetables had started wilting in the icebox. The ham bone cost nothing. Butchers gave them away or sold them for a penny. By evening, the soup was thick enough to stand a spoon in. Paired with cornbread from a nickel's worth of cornmeal, it was a complete meal that kept working families functional through the week. After the war, Campbell's marketed convenience so aggressively that dried beans gradually disappeared from most American pantries. Families started paying 35 cents for a can of diluted soup when the genuine version cost a third of that and fed more people for longer. Number 14. Honey on wounds. When someone got cut or scraped, your grandmother skipped the antiseptic and reached for raw honey instead, spreading it directly onto the wound before wrapping it with clean cloth. Honey is naturally antibacterial. Its low moisture content and acidic pH create conditions where bacteria genuinely cannot establish. During the Depression, a doctor visit ran $2, more than many families brought home in an entire day. A jar of honey from a neighbor's hive cost 15 cents. Local health departments in several states pushed back on this practice in the 1940s, categorizing it as unsanitary folk medicine and steering families toward commercial antiseptics. In 2007, the FDA approved medical-grade honey for wound treatment. Hospitals now apply it to burns and post-surgical wounds as a standard of care. She was not being superstitious. She was arriving at the right answer before the institutions caught up. Number 13. Mending until it could not be mended. A shirt with a hole did not go in the trash. It got patched. Socks with worn heels were darned back to whole using a wooden egg and a needle, new thread woven carefully across the gap until the gap no longer existed. A sewing kit cost a few cents. A darning egg was a nickel. Children wore patched overalls without embarrassment because every other family on the street did the same. Mothers kept fabric scrap bins and stitched by lamplight after the children were asleep. A man's work shirt might carry 4 separate patches before it was finally retired as a cleaning rag. After the war, the clothing industry pushed disposable fashion, and mending became culturally coded as something people did only when they had no other choice. Americans now discard 85 pounds of textile waste per person each year. The industry that taught us to stop mending is the same one now selling us sustainability at a premium. Pattern break 2. Home canning was cheaper than the store. This is where the food industry gets genuinely uncomfortable. Depression-era families canned everything: tomatoes, beans, peaches, pickles, jams, meats, and anything else the garden or the market produced. A pressure canner ran about $4 and lasted for decades. Mason jars were a dime each and got reused year after year. Your grandmother could put up an entire summer garden for under $5 and feed her family vegetables through every month of winter without spending another cent on produce. The USDA published detailed canning guides throughout the 1930s. By the 1960s, the tone had shifted. Home canning was suddenly framed as dangerous. Botulism became the headline. The processed food industry, selling factory-canned vegetables at 30 cents per can, had every financial reason to discourage home preservation. Properly executed pressure canning is safe. The USDA's own data has always confirmed it. But the scare campaign accomplished what it set out to do. Whole generations stopped canning, and Americans began paying 300% markups for factory versions of what their grandmothers had put up for pennies. Number 11. Brewing grounds twice. Your grandfather did not throw out coffee grounds after the first pot. He spread them on a baking sheet to dry, then brewed them a second time, sometimes cutting the reuse with a small scoop of fresh grounds to maintain some strength. A pound of coffee cost about 25 cents, and this method could stretch it across 3 weeks. The second brew ran lighter, but it was still coffee. Used grounds had further lives after the pot. Into the garden as fertilizer. Onto icy walkways in winter for traction. Nothing was assigned a single purpose. Everything had somewhere else to go. Modern coffee culture sells single-serve pods at $1 each and markets that as a convenience. Your grandfather extracted a week's worth of coffee from what we throw away after 1 cup. Number 10. Lard biscuits. 3 ingredients: flour, lard, and buttermilk. Sometimes just flour, lard, water, and a pinch of baking soda. Your grandmother cut cold lard into the flour using 2 knives, working quickly so the fat stayed chilled. She patted out the dough, pressed rounds with an overturned glass, and slid them into a hot oven for 12 minutes. A full pan of golden, flaky biscuits cost under 3 cents. With gravy, they were a meal. With jam, they were breakfast. Plain with a scrape of butter, they were a snack. The cold lard created pockets of steam during baking that produced layers no vegetable shortening has ever replicated. When Crisco pushed its way into American kitchens in the 1950s, biscuit texture shifted across the country. Bakers today pay premium prices for European butter, trying to recreate what lard achieved naturally for pennies. Number 9. Reusing bathwater. In homes without indoor plumbing, and in the 1930s that was nearly half of rural America, bath night meant heating water on the stove and filling a galvanized tub set up in the kitchen. The same water served the whole family, moving from cleanest to dirtiest. Children first, then the mother, then the father coming in from fieldwork last. After the family was done, the water went onto the garden. Heating water over a wood stove required time and fuel. Every gallon in that tub represented real labor. Pouring it down the drain when it still had somewhere useful to go was not something that happened. The average American uses 80 gallons of water per day today. Your great-grandmother's entire household might have used 20 gallons across an entire week and found a second purpose for every drop. Number 8. Stale bread became bread pudding. When the loaf went stale, and without preservatives it went stale fast, The dried heels and hardened slices did not go in the waste bin. They went into a bowl with eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, soaked until soft, then poured into a greased pan and baked until the top turned golden and the custard below had set. A handful of raisins or a shake of cinnamon made it something children specifically looked forward to. The entire dessert cost about 5 cents. A Depression-era kitchen had no category for bread that was past eating fresh. Stale bread was simply an ingredient waiting for its next form. Bread pudding appeared at church suppers and holiday gatherings without apology, because everyone at the table understood the principle of not wasting anything that still had value. Americans today throw away 63 million tons of food annually. Your grandmother fed 8 people by throwing away nothing. Pattern break 3, the hay box. Before slow cookers and instant pots, there was the hay box, the original set it and forget it method, and it required no electricity at all. Your grandmother brought a pot of stew or beans to a rolling boil on the stove, then transferred the covered pot into a wooden box packed tight with hay, old blankets, or crumpled newspaper. The insulation held the heat, and the food continued cooking for hours without another drop of fuel being spent. Beans started at 7 in the morning, came out tender by noon on nothing but residual heat. Fuel was a genuine cost during the Depression. The hay box cut fuel consumption on slow-cooked dishes by as much as 70%. The government actually promoted this method during both world wars to conserve resources on the home front. After the wars ended, utility companies had no interest in a device that shrank their customers' gas bills. The hay box disappeared from American kitchens entirely. You can build one today for free with a cardboard box and a stack of old towels. It works exactly the same as it did 90 years ago. Number 6. Honey, lemon, and a splash of whiskey. When a child got sick during the Depression and a doctor visit was financially out of the question for most families, your grandmother made her own cough syrup. Warmed honey, the juice of half a lemon, and a tablespoon of cheap bourbon given before bed. The honey coated and soothed the throat. The lemon contributed vitamin C. The whiskey helped everyone rest. A bottle of inexpensive bourbon ran about $1 and carried a household through an entire flu season. Commercial patent cough medicines cost 50 cents a bottle and frequently delivered less. A Penn State study in 2007 found that honey outperformed the leading over-the-counter cough suppressant when tested in children. The pharmaceutical industry spends $4 billion a year selling cough medicine. Your grandmother's version cost a nickel per dose and came out ahead on the results. Number 5. Soured milk made better pancakes. When milk turned sour, and without refrigeration, summer heat could accomplish that in under a day, it did not get thrown out. It went directly into the pancake batter. Sour milk reacted with baking soda to release carbon dioxide, lifting the batter without any baking powder required. The lactic acid softened the gluten, giving the finished pancakes a tenderness and a subtle tang that fresh sweet milk could not produce. A quart of milk was 10 cents. Wasting it was not a concept that existed in that kitchen. Soured milk went into biscuits, cornbread, and chocolate cake, where the acidity brought out depth in the cocoa. What we now pay $4 a quart for at the grocery store, buttermilk, is essentially what Depression-era milk became naturally by sitting on the counter for an extra day. They got it for free by waiting. Number 4. Regrowing from scraps. Your grandmother bought green onions once. She used the tops, and she dropped the white root ends into a jar of water on the windowsill. New shoots appeared within days. The same approach worked with celery bottoms, lettuce hearts, and potato eyes. A single potato with 4 healthy eyes produced 4 separate plants. Each plant yielded 6 to 8 potatoes in return. This was not casual gardening as a pastime. It was survival agriculture practiced on kitchen counters and fire escapes across the country. At its peak, 20 million victory gardens produced 40% of the nation's vegetables. After the war, the grocery industry lobbied hard to end the Victory Garden program. Those gardens represented customers who were not shopping. Federal funding for home garden initiatives quietly dried up, and within a generation, most Americans had lost the knowledge of how to produce their own food. Number 3. Soda pop in the cake batter. It sounds like something invented on a dare, but pouring Coca-Cola or ginger ale into cake batter was a legitimate Depression-era baking technique. When eggs and milk were both unavailable, your grandmother could still put cake on the table by stirring a bottle of soda pop into dry ingredients and sliding the pan into the oven. The carbonation bubbles served as a leavening agent, lifting the cake without any eggs at all. Cola worked particularly well in chocolate cake. It deepened the color and added complexity to the flavor. Lemon soda paired cleanly with yellow cake. The result was moist, tender, and always well received at the church social. The chemistry has since been confirmed by food scientists. Carbonic acid in the soda reacts with baking soda in the mix, producing a lighter crumb structure than eggs alone can achieve. Cake mix cost about 15 cents and a bottle of soda a nickel, 20 cents for a cake that served 20 people. Modern baking calls for $3 eggs and $4 butter. Your grandmother needed neither. Number 2. The barter network. Depression era. Neighborhoods operated informal exchange systems that functioned entirely outside the cash economy. Eggs traded for milk. A day's sewing earned a bushel of apples. Piano lessons went for firewood. In some communities, these arrangements were organized into local script, printed currency that circulated among participating families and kept goods and services moving without a single dollar changing hands. The government watched these networks with genuine unease. Local currencies threatened the banking system. Barter income was invisible to the IRS. Federal authorities eventually shut down several community script systems, arguing they violated currency law. But the informal networks survived on trust and handshakes. A woman who could sew traded that skill for food. A man who could repair engines traded that labor for rent. When prosperity returned after the war, the barter networks dissolved. But the lesson they left behind has never entirely faded. When the formal system collapses, the communities that already trust each other find a way through. Number 1. The backyard garden. The most powerful survival tool of the entire Depression era was not a recipe, a cleaning trick, or a preservation technique. It was the backyard garden, not the decorative herb pot on the balcony, but every available inch of soil turned toward food production. Tomatoes climbing the south-facing wall, beans running up the fence line, squash sprawling beneath the corn, potatoes pushed into every unoccupied corner. A well-managed quarter-acre plot could produce the equivalent of $1,000 worth of food in today's money every single year for the cost of a few dollars in seeds. The USDA promoted home gardening actively throughout the 1930s and 1940s. Then the post-war food industry needed consumers, not producers. Suburban development paved over garden plots. Homeowners associations banned vegetable beds in front yards. Zoning laws restricted backyard chickens. The same government that once urged Americans to grow food began issuing fines for doing exactly that. Some municipalities still carry ordinances against front yard vegetable gardens. Think carefully about what that means. The most fundamental act of human self-sufficiency, practiced continuously for 10,000 years, made illegal in certain neighborhoods because it threatened a grocery industry's revenue. That is not an accident. That is a policy decision made on someone else's behalf. Here is the challenge before you close this out. Try one thing from this list this week. Just one. Save your bacon grease. Regrow a green onion on the windowsill. Make a pan of lard biscuits from scratch. Then come back and make the case that your grandmother had it wrong. There is a bacon grease jar on my stove right now. And anything cooked in it is better than anything that has ever come out of a bottle. Tell me in the comments which one you are going to try. I want to know whether honey as a wound treatment gets more attention than bread pudding. These were never just survival tricks. They were knowledge, practical, hard-earned, deeply effective knowledge that food companies and chemical manufacturers spent billions to bury. Your great-grandmother carried it. Now you have it back.